Morning. Morning, everyone. Beloved, in today's gospel, we find Jesus in a very similar situation to that in which we find him today. In this passage, we find Jesus caught between religious and political leaders who earlier in this passage were offended and threatened by Jesus' prophetic witness and wisdom. You see, Jesus had started preaching, and when Jesus had started preaching, some things started landing, and some things started landing a little too close to home. You see, Jesus had begun to tell one of his parables as only Jesus could, being a master storyteller. The Pharisees and Herodians began to lean in, and they pulled out their popcorn, and Reverend Sally, they poured some extra butter over the top of the popcorn, and they started to enjoy the movie, only to realize that halfway through, the movie was actually about them, and they were not the heroes. The words and the very life of Jesus had become a threat to their power. And so now we find them here in today's gospel story, attempting to silence Jesus and get him out of the way. But beloved, they can't do it in a way that's too obvious, because Jesus is so popular. An entire crowd has gathered just for him, just to sit at his feet and learn from him. So they can't just take him out in broad daylight. And so they set up a little thought experiment for Jesus. They devise a trap, Sister Risa, and it's a good trap, a really good trap. They ask Jesus, is it right to pay the imperial tax to Caesar or not? Is it right to pay the imperial tax to Caesar or not? Now, this is a fairly innocuous question on the surface, but of course we got to understand the context if we're to understand the conflict. You see, the imperial tax was economically crushing and oppressive to the Jewish people of Jesus' time, who lived under the oppressive rule of the Roman Empire without any of the benefits of Roman citizenship. In many ways, Jews under Roman rule back then lived the experience of black people in America right now, under the rule of the empire, but without many of the benefits of that same empire. Are y'all hearing me this morning? So the imperial tax was wildly unpopular with the Jewish people due to how it decimated them financially. But it was also the law. It was legalized injustice. So if Jesus tells them to pay the tax to Caesar, he'll be on the wrong side of the people and in danger of losing his following. But if Jesus tells them not to pay the tax, Sister Julianne, then he'll be on the wrong side of the empire and in danger of losing his freedom and maybe more. You see the conflict? Oh, but you gotta love Jesus. Look at somebody and say, you gotta love Jesus. Oh, that neighbor doesn't believe it. Find somebody else and say, you gotta love Jesus. Because in one sentence, Jesus flips the entire question on its head. Because you see, beloved, the very same religious and political leaders who were trying to catch Jesus in this trap about paying taxes were also levying their own special religious taxes onto the everyday Jewish people as well. And it made them enormously wealthy at everyday people's expense. So when Jesus gives his answer, it's not a bland, give to Caesar what is Caesar's and give to God what is God's. It's not this politically neutral and indifferent response. No, my friend. Jesus instead is looking them in the face with everybody watching and essentially saying, I know y'all ain't the ones talking. He says, you know what you owe Caesar, and you also know what you owe God. To put it another way, Jesus says, I know what y'all did last summer. And the summer before that, and the summer before that, and I know what you got planned for this coming summer. So go on ahead and pay Caesar, and make sure you stop by God's office afterwards to pay her back for everything that you've been taking and robbing from the people. And I love the gospel. And they were amazed at him. Translation, some Pharisees mumbled, he got some nerve. Beloved, don't we find Jesus in a similar situation today? Doesn't it seem that we find Jesus seemingly caught today? Caught between religious and political leaders who are offended and threatened by the true prophetic witness of Jesus, so they seek to silence Jesus and get him up out of the way. But because of his popularity, they know they can't dismiss him outright, so they seek to trap and co-opt his message and entire existence. Am I preaching to somebody this morning? Beloved, there are people still in the business of trapping Jesus. There are people still in the business of trapping Jesus for the sole purpose of getting him out of the way to preserve their own standing and power. And the anxiety and the heaviness that we can feel at this time of year, the anxiety and the heaviness that sits in our bodies and in our bones, especially this time of year, is because many times we find ourselves like the same crowd in this passage, witnessing it all take place and caught in the crosshairs of marginalization ourselves. Oh, but there's good news this morning, beloved. Look at somebody and say, there's good news. You know I wouldn't have come here without some good news. There's good news this morning. And the good news is that same Jesus who would not be trapped back then is the same Jesus who still will not be trapped right now. Oh, so the good news is that the Jesus that we put our hope in today doesn't need defending, and his kingdom, contrary to popular belief, doesn't need protecting. Oh, the good news today is that if anybody is having trouble differentiating the real Jesus from the Jesus of white Christian nationalism, in order to see things clearly, you just gotta look for a Jesus that ain't trapped. Oh, the good news is, church, that our hope, especially on a day like today, is not found in the Jesus who is trapped in patriarchy, but in the Jesus who is liberated and seeks to liberate all people from gender-based violence and oppression. The good news, church, is that our hope, especially on a day like today, is not found in a Jesus who is trapped in anti-black racism, anti-immigrant legislation, and xenophobia, but in the brown Jesus who lived the black experience and was himself considered an outsider. There's some good news this morning, church. Our hope today is not found in a Jesus who is trapped in homophobia and transphobia, but in the Jesus whose greatest commandment was love and who never condemned anyone over whom they chose to share their love with. Are y'all hearing me in this place this morning? The good news is this morning is that our Jesus still ain't trapped. Oh, look at somebody and say, Jesus still isn't trapped. The good news is this morning, beloved, as our souls go through election cycle after election cycle after election cycle, holding its collective breath, the good news is that there is a resting place for our souls. And it's beyond our political systems. There's a resting place for our souls. And it's beyond our political systems. Not that we bypass our political systems are necessary, and it is our civic duty and an act of faith to engage them. But beloved, there is a resting place beyond the vicissitudes of our political systems. And that resting place is in the hands of a free Jesus. That resting place is in the hands of a free Jesus who refuses to be trapped by the systems and powers of this world. The good news is there is a resting place for our souls this morning, and is in the hands of a free Jesus who refuses to be trapped by the systems and powers of this world. So with that being said, I just want to do something just for 2 minutes. I could preach a little while longer, but my throat is getting dry. So let's just do this for 2 minutes. I just want us to breathe in that reality, that there is a resting place for our souls. Because for so many of us, our souls have been holding its collective breath. But there's an exhale available in the free hands of Jesus. And I just want us to take a couple of minutes just to breathe in and experience and embody that reality this morning. I'll set a timer. Siri, set timer for 3 minutes. And as we breathe.
There are no timers set.
Okay. Well, that didn't go as planned. Siri picked a great time to just not listen to me. That's never happened before. As we breathe on the in-breath, we'll say the name of Jesus, the name above all names. We'll say the name of Jesus on the in-breath, and on the out-breath, we'll just allow our souls to exhale, and we'll say the phrase, set us free. Since our Jesus isn't trapped, he wasn't trapped back then and he ain't trapped right now, we have the ability to call on the one who is free to set us free. So on the in-breath, Jesus, set us free. Jesus, set us free. And just find a rhythm of breathing that works for you. This is the end of my song. I'm going to go sit down and breathe with y'all. Jesus, set us free. This is the resting place for our souls in the hands of a free Jesus.